So boards usually consider that their CEO is the most important appointment they can make, and indeed it's a really important appointment. But there's another key role that boards are also responsible for, and that's the company secretary. And in the hundreds of boards that I've worked with, there's a common element to boards that function well, and that's the company secretary. So what makes for a good company secretary, and who should perform that role? And I think the key thing is to be effective as a company secretary, you need to have some training and ideally some qualifications, because indeed it's a profession in its own right. What are some of the things that professional company secretaries can do? Well, there's probably 5 things I'd call out. And the first one is they administer the board's work. They make sure the board's got an effective work plan for the year that covers off all the things the board needs to do. The second thing is they ensure that the board's got the right papers for its meetings. And in this way, they're almost like a quality assurance role. They're making sure that proper templates are being adhered to, that attachments are included, that the board papers read in a logical way, that they interface well together. Thirdly, a really important role of the company secretary, of course, is to take the board meeting minutes. And that's the legal evidence of the board's meeting. Minutes are, of course, used to both prosecute and defend directors at the end of the day. I've done another post on how important meeting minutes are. Another key role of the company secretary is to make sure actions are recorded. And actions are important to make sure the work of the board is continued and is effected in practice. And executives are looking to those actions to know exactly what they've got to do, and the company secretary not only takes the actions but it also ensures they're implemented. The 5th key role of a professional company secretary is to be a key source of governance advice for the board. So, for example, company secretary might advise on how conflicts of interest are appropriately managed. They might also advise on key developments in the law relevant to, say, directors' duties and how they're performed in practice. I see in organisations different approaches to company secretaries. An approach that I don't think is very useful is giving an administrative officer without any training the role. Sometimes another approach is to give an executive in the organisation also the role of company secretary, and that can be effective, but there's a few things to look out for in that regard. Firstly, it means that effectively that officer is dual-hatted. In their company secretary role, they report to the board, and the board indeed should monitor their performance, but in their other role, they're reporting to the CEO. That can bring about conflicts of interest that need to be managed. Issues of board confidentiality might also arise because, of course, the company secretary might be privy to information that not even the CEO is. And also there's some practical elements in board meetings. If that officer is reporting on their functional area, how do they also take the board meeting minutes? At the end of the day though, it is really useful to look at what the best structure is, and sometimes it can't be internally resourced, and therefore an outsourced service might be appropriate. So there's various models whereby companies can contract in professional support, where a company secretary comes in, usually around the board and the committee meetings for a few days a month, and make sure those key functions are performed. I think the question boards really need to ask themselves at the end of the day though is not whether they can afford to have a professional and a trained company secretary, but whether they can afford not to have one.